Michael's video playing. Right now he's screen sharing.
Good morning, everyone. It's our 9 a.m. adult Bible study, and we'll finish with this last piece from Miriam, which has another, maybe 15 seconds to play.
Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Sheila. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Hi, morning.
So good morning, everyone. Again, this is our 9 a.m. adult Bible study. We are on our third section of Adam Hamilton's Unafraid. We have a good crowd today, I'm glad to see, including some people with very interesting backgrounds in their pictures. Thanks for sharing. Everybody's getting more and more sophisticated with this Zoom system and the video conferencing. So today, our goals for today are to explore courage and how its presence in social interactions helps us to overcome fear, understand grace as a theological concept related to acceptance, examine the fears that social media habits can exacerbate, and connect meaning making with the practices of faith. So from last week, we talked about news sources. Did anybody try a different news source? And if so, did you see a difference? And you're muted, so unmute yourself to talk, please. Or raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Anyone? All right, well, I'll share. We continue to watch 3 or 4 different channels, which includes CBS, NBC, and Fox News. And there are differences, and I think by watching more than one, we get different perspectives of the news and what people, what different commentators and reporters feel are important, and how the media can, with a few word changes, change how they're reporting something. So I think it's important to make sure you're not just watching one TV or reading one newspaper. Of course, with the nice thing about, or the bad thing about, depending on your perspective, the local paper is that here in Las Vegas is you get 2 newspapers in one. You get the Sun and you get the RJ. And if you read them both, you'll get a wide range of perspectives. So does anybody else have something they want to share about that? Did you look at any headlines differently after last week's discussions?
There's also 2 online newspapers that you can get daily on your computer that give you a different perspective also.
Okay, which ones are those, Barb?
The Nevada Independent
Okay.
and Nevada Current.
Oh, okay. By the way, is David with you on as well?
He's coming on if he's not
Okay.
already on.
That's fine. I don't see him. That's why I was just checking. I'm checking off the breeze list. So if everybody sees me working on my phone, it's because I'm working on my breeze list.
Can you hear me? This is Linda.
Yes, Linda, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think ever since this pandemic started, I've been recording a whole bunch of news channels and radio, and like you just said, I see the exact same thing. Certain ones are definitely paying more attention to what I would call, I'm not prepared to talk yet, sensational things and scary things, scary things. And then there are others that I feel are closer to a realistic news format, just reporting statistics and data and not going into the opinion of all of it. But I do watch as many as 4 or 5 a day, including national British, what do they call it? The national public stations.
PBS or NPR?
Yeah, all of those.
Okay, good.
I find myself doing it all day long, but coming up with my own interpretation of what they're trying to say.
Yeah, we have the news on most of the day as well. You will notice a difference though, but I do encourage everyone to get the data and look at the data if you're trying to track what's going on with the virus, not just listen to the daily activity. Look at the weekly summaries. Down at the bottom, there's these graphs about hospitals, and so far Nevada's doing okay. I mean, yes, it's tight. Yes, we're having a lot more deaths than we want. Any death is too many, but we're doing okay with our hospitals. I think when the casinos opened up and suggested masks and no one did it, and the bars were packed, we started spreading it. But I think from what I'm hearing, it's mainly younger people, and younger being people under 60, which means is most of us. But hopefully you guys are staying out of the bars.
Well, they're now closed.
You don't have to share. You don't have to tell us. Anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just wanted to mention that it is important to keep thinking about some of the things we've been discussing, because getting different perspectives is very important, no matter what we're doing. So, how often do you pick it up? And what do you use it for? Think about news. How many calls do you receive?
News and reading every day.
Yeah. How often do you play a game or surf the web? We're not going to try to discuss each one of these questions. I just want to think about it. How often do you check social media using your phone or your computer? And since you got your phone, how have your connections with other people changed? Do you find yourself sitting at a dining room table and texting the person across from you? Or out at a restaurant and sending a text to the people at the next table who are friends, as opposed to just saying hi and talking to them? Of course, nowadays, you're probably more than 6 feet away if you're at a restaurant and you see friends. So the question is, do you feel more or less connected to others in significant ways? So I wanted to have you think about this as we do our opening prayer. And you're welcome to join if you wish. Lord, you speak throughout the cosmos and in the depths, that should be depths of our being. You know the desperate ways we long to be connected and the patterns of distraction that will fill our days. Take the fears that we speak. Hear the deeper desires of our hearts. Be among us and between us as we search for each other and for you. Amen. And I'll fix that right now so we'll have it correct for the posterity. Okay, so we're ready for the video and discussion. So I thought I fixed this. Oh, I know. It's on the next page. Okay, so instead of asking you the questions after, I'm going to tell you what the questions are, and then you can think about, as the discussion goes on, what the answers are. So it hopefully will facilitate more of a discussion. Since last week I figured out that without knowing the questions ahead of time, you weren't studying for the questions, you were just listening. And some of these questions are details. So, hi David, glad you joined. So what did Carlos, Ginger, and Marie learn by facing their fears of failure? Why did Ginger feel that social media was not sufficient to help people feel connected to others? How did Christian Sid describe codependency? Why is this unhealthy? How does faith help us address our sense of meaning? Okay, so think about these as we watch the video. And I will try to get to the right screen and get the video set here.
Well, as we gather together for this session, we're going to be talking about some really important things we experience in our own lives. We're going to talk about the fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of rejection, the fear of disappointing other people, the fear of insignificance and loneliness. And I see a lot of head shaking going on around here. Because these are the kind of things that all of us as human beings wrestle with and experience in our lives. And so we're going to look to see how does that fear affect our lives? How do we overcome that kind of fear? And I think about the paralysis that comes, especially when I think about the fear of failure. If I am afraid of failing, I'm afraid of embarrassing myself, I'm afraid of being criticized, if that fear is too strong, we're all going to feel that fear. But if I don't overcome that fear, and in essence, the definition of courage is in some ways overcoming our fears and doing what we're afraid to do. If I don't overcome that fear, I'm not going to accomplish anything, do anything, really experience any of the great experiences of life. So fear of failure is one of those things that can be it can stop us from truly living. I think about, in addition to that, the fear of loneliness and the fear of rejection from people, and how many people live with that sense of just being afraid that I'm never going to have, maybe I'm never going to have a spouse, maybe I'm never going to have love, I'm never going to experience that. And in particular, there's been, over the last few years, an increase in the number of suicides. In the community where I live, there's been a huge increase in suicides. We've seen now it's 20 suicides in the last 6 months. Not all of them church members, many of them family members or friends, but people who are feeling either that life is meaningless or hopeless, or I'm unloved and I'm never going to have it or experience love. I mean, this fear that it's never going to get any better, and that whatever I'm experiencing, this is the way it's always going to be. So I guess I'd like to ask you first, when and where have you experienced a fear of criticism or a fear of failure? And did you ever experience that to a degree that you didn't go ahead and do the thing? Maybe it just kept you from from moving ahead? And I'd like to start with you, Carlos. I wonder if you have.
Yeah, English is not my first language, and when I had the opportunity to go to seminary, I was blessed to receive a scholarship for me to go through a very highly academic institution, and I was so afraid of failing that I put at risk my relationship at home with my wife, because I was just trying to um, overextend of the things that I could do, and the difficulties of me trying to write academic papers, and it was it was a very, very, very miserable time. And to be honest, there were moments in which I felt alone. There were moments in which I just felt that I was completely just as full of stress, and I'm thankful because of our connection with the United Methodist Church. I was able to find a group of people that walk along with me in that phase, but I was terrified about just failing.
Yeah, that's understandable. How about you, Ginger? Any times
Yeah,
where-
well, for me, it's finding the courage to post a blog post, to hit the send button, knowing not everybody's going to agree with this, and not everybody's going to interpret it the same way I do. But I was at a neighborhood party one night, and I was about to quit. I was like, maybe I'm not meant to be a writer. It's too scary. And I was writing on some opinions that were hot topics at the time, and people weren't agreeing with me and posting their comments. And so I was about to throw in the towel, and a man at a neighborhood party said, I don't go to church. I don't want to go to church, but I get on my wife's Facebook on Sunday morning and I read your post, and that's my church. And I thought, you know what? That's the sign I needed to keep doing it, no matter the criticism, because there's somebody, and and so every time I pray, God, let this touch who you need it to touch, and hit send. But I've had to I want to just hide. I don't want to put it out there because of the criticism. I want everyone to love everything I do, and if they don't. So I've just had to accept I'm going to serve those that I'm called to serve, and there will be criticism.
Yeah. How about you, Marie? Do you struggle at all with the fear of failure or fear of criticism or rejection?
Well, yes. One of the times in my career as a nurse, I remember a failure with presenting a class to a group of nurses. It was my very first time presenting that class. It was one of my very first times teaching nurses. And I was really concerned about how I was going to be able to present, because I wasn't a public speaker at that time. And so I thought about how I'm going to do this. And when I looked out at them, I thought, I'm not doing this very well. I'm feeling like I'm failing. So I said to my director afterwards, I just don't think that I did this very well. And she was encouraging of, what lessons did you learn from this? So take what you think is a failure and use it as an opportunity to improve on what you're doing. So it was a failure for me, but it also was an opportunity to improve in what I was doing.
Yeah, that's excellent.
That's excellent.
It strikes me that you cannot live life and have an impact on the world, do anything that's bold or that's going to have make a difference if you're not willing to face criticism, and you're going to be criticized. And the people who make a difference in the world are the folks who refuse to give into that fear, and they continue to move forward. So I'm wondering, in your own life, when we think about loneliness, how have you wrestled with loneliness? Do you ever wrestle with it, a fear of being unloved or a fear of loneliness? And how do you deal with that as people of faith? Marie, any thoughts on that?
Well, to combat that loneliness or that feeling of loneliness, I make sure that I'm part of groups that I can associate with, like a clergy women's group, or my family, being more intentional about being with my family, because I'm single, and so I think about those things of how do I create community for myself, and making sure that I have positive people that I'm surrounded with. And so intergenerational type of relationships as well, not just people that are my age, but having conversations with people that are older than me, that are younger than me, that can share in some of the same things that I like, and things that I don't particularly care about, that I can develop an interest in.
Yeah, that's good.
one of the healing experiences or the healing moments, it's that I need to share a meal with people. Like, I feel like just being in the table is just a wonderful spiritual connection, like fostering those relationships that my wife and I also experience. And my wife is not a Spanish speaking individual, and so in the community that I serve, sometimes she also feels very lonely, and so I need to help her, and I need to help myself to foster things outside of our church and the community. And like I said, it just happens to foster those moments of having conversation. And now we're having a 3-year-old, and it's more difficult to do a lot of things. But I feel like in order to stay afloat and to survive, and we need to make the time to.
Absolutely. Ginger, there's a lot of conversation today about social media and the impact it's had on real relationships. And so we can say, well, social media is real relationships, but we're finding less young people getting out to come to youth group, less young people getting involved in actual physical connections because they're connecting with each other all the time. Do you how do you see that, and or why is it not enough just to be able to connect over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a kind of, or my theory on it is there's an energy that needs to be exchanged when people are together. I need to look in your eyes. I need to feel your energy, and we don't get that on devices. And I think that's why it takes energy to go be with somebody, and yet it feeds you. And I love being with people and get my energy from being with people. And so I had to kind of look at solitude versus loneliness, because I quickly go into loneliness, like, oh, I'm all alone and everybody else is out doing something fun. And, reading social media makes me feel like I'm missing something, that fear of missing out that you talk about in your book. And I had to turn that into a spiritual practice and be alone with God and appreciate solitude instead of letting myself wallow in that pity of loneliness. So I've had to really work at that because I do love being with people, and social media doesn't do it for me. It takes that energy of being in the presence of another person.
I want to wrap it up by asking about the role, because you've really talked about this well, this idea of solitude versus loneliness, and that one of the companions we have in our life when we may feel all alone is our faith in God. How have you experienced that friendship with God, and how do you cultivate a sense of God's presence for people who maybe don't feel God? How do we sense God's presence? How do we feel that we're not alone? Marie, any thoughts on your own spiritual life and how you experience God's presence in your life?
Sharing time with friends in a moment of prayer. I have a dinner group that I meet with once a month, and it's good to be able to be at the same table, but we also keep each other in prayer. And then there's a clergy women's group that I'm a part of that we gather and pray together, sing together, and share each other's concerns and keep each other lifted in prayer. I'm finding also the practice of intentionally every morning writing down my conversations with God to myself and writing in my journal of where God is speaking to me, and then the concerns that I have that I want to lift up to God, putting that down on paper, because next week I may not remember exactly what those concerns are, but I want to make sure that I have been intentional about sharing those concerns from my heart.
Excellent. So there's probably not a human being around who doesn't fear failure. Very few of us who don't fear disappointing other people. We all worry a bit about living meaningless lives or insignificant lives, and sometimes we're afraid of being alone, and that probably means we're human. But it also points to the fact that there are things that we can do, we must do, and when we do them, when we press through those feelings, we find that we live with courage and hope. So thank you for a great and meaningful conversation. Look forward to our next conversation together. I'm delighted to have with me Christian Sid as our expert today. She is the CEO and president of the Serenity Counseling Center in Gallatin, Tennessee. She's done this for 10 years there, and she's been a therapist, caring for people, helping them find healing and hope. And Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a delight to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So if you could, this study we're doing is on fear and how prevalent fear is and how we wrestle with our fears and how we can live unafraid. I'm just curious, In your counseling practice, how prevalent is fear? How big of an issue is fear for people today?
Fear is huge in human behavior. It's something that we all face, but it's something that at times can be crippling depending on our confidence level, our self-worth, and our environment and how confident we feel supported. So fear, sometimes we do not jump into some things or make decisions for the fear of rejection or not fitting in.
Do you see very many people who struggle with the desperate need to please other people, to try to, where they are, I think of people pleasers, and many of us, I'm a pastor, I'm a people pleaser, but you can see that almost go to a unhealthy place. Do you see much of that in your practice?
Absolutely, and we call that codependency. It is definitely that people pleaser, wanting someone to be happy with you. You're always giving, going out of your way to make that person happy with you. It's very unhealthy. It is very unhealthy, and it also breaks down family relationships, where it's very hard for individuals within a family to think independently because they're so codependent on how that other family member has thought in the past or what they will think in a certain situation in the future. So it kind of holds back that independence of having their own opinion of something.
Can you think of an example of somebody that you had worked with who had been severely codependent, and then how they became set free, or maybe the story of how they finally found liberation from that?
A lot of times in the unhealthy codependency, it does, push the other person away, such as in friendships or relationships or marriages. And just recently, that happened in a very unhealthy, very toxic relationship between, early 20s, a couple, and that relationship actually ending, showed that person that they could have, some power and self-worth and self-value without having to manipulate or control the person in the relationship.
All right, thank you. And finally, I guess I'd ask about the sense of meaning or purpose in people's lives. One of the chapters in the book is about our fear of living meaningless lives, or a fear that we will not have accomplished everything we were to accomplish. Recently, I was speaking to a couple of young people, and I asked them, "What's your greatest fear?" And they said, our fears, each of them separately said, my fear is that I will have missed out on accomplishing what I was supposed to accomplish, or that my life will have been ultimately meaningless. What do you see much of that, where people are living afraid that they might not live into their purpose, they might not fulfill whatever they were supposed to fulfill as a human being?
Yeah, and a lot of times when I sit down with individuals, it's when they finally settled into their careers, maybe early to mid 40s, and they say, okay, I think I've settled and found my career, but finding my purpose in life, what is that I need to seek or search? And a lot of times it's really putting things in perspective for clients and saying, what about your life that you've accomplished at this point that you feel isn't satisfying or good?
Okay, very good. What role does faith play in finding healing for people, in particular in addressing their fears of failure or meaninglessness or loneliness?
I would say for those who are believers and they're lost, or they've come to a dry spell, faith plays a huge aspect. I feel like even for unbelievers, even when we talk about faith, it's very important to begin to believe in something greater than yourself. In faith, we're not really giving or doing for ourselves. We are truly serving and doing for others without anything in reward. And that's really what our walk and our life should be about, is giving and serving, knowing that there is something higher, than ourselves, that's going to be the ultimate reward in life.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk to you today, Christian. Thank you for sharing with us, and God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. I appreciated so much Christian's emphasis on how faith plays a role in finding healing from the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, and the fear of being unloved. I think about the word grace, and that's what comes to mind when I consider the emphasis in the chapters that you've been studying this week. Grace, this idea that you don't have to earn love, it's already given to you, that you are already important and you matter to God. Your life has meaning to God, and when in our faith we trust that, we find the fears begin to dissipate. I love my children. I love them more than I could possibly explain. I love them not because of anything they've done, but because of who they are. They are mine. They are my children. And this is how God feels about us. And when we can rest secure in the love of God, when we know our lives have meaning and purpose to Him, then we find the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of meaningless lives, the fear of being alone begins to dissipate. And we can live unafraid with courage and hope.
Okay. So, did anybody else take notes? So those of you who did or didn't take notes, who want to answer these questions, let's spend a minute or two. We've got a lot of material to cover. We're not going to get it all covered, obviously. We're going to hit the highlights. So somebody want to talk about what they learned from the three other people he interviewed, talking about their learning from their facing their fears of failure?
One thing I think I liked that the young man said was it's often helpful to find people to walk alongside with you as you're going through something that you're very fearful of.
Sheila, did you have something?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, okay. That's good. I thought one thing that just caught me at the very end in regard to grace, the comparison as to how we love our children. And that was as in relationship to how God loves us. And I thought that was very interesting. I'd never heard it explained that way as far as grace goes. And I really got a lot out of that. Codependency was another one that I think a lot of us have in our families. We don't even realize it, but it can cause a lot of anxiety and sometimes upsetting situations if we don't really recognize how we are in response to other people that we love. Failure, oh yeah, I think all of us probably have had a sense of fear of failure. I know I have. And I just have to get outside of myself. And I remember when I had to give speeches at a job that I had, I was afraid to get up in front of the organization. And for some reason, I kept saying to myself, Lord, please let the words that come out of my mouth are your words and not mine. And you know, that gave me strength. I'll always remember that.
Thank you.
That's it for now.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
I think they said facing your fears helps you learn too. Dealing with them and facing them and talking about them with someone else helps you grow.
Yeah, we have a saying in our business, continuous improvement. So you always want to continue learning from what's happened, and then continuing to improve through looking at the lessons learned, looking at what you learned. That was something Marie had said. Carlos, as I think Jen pointed out, found that the church helped him get through some of his difficulties with his seminary. And Ginger was talking about just having the courage to push send. She's a blog writer. If you didn't pick it up from the first first week's video, she writes a blog column. It's one of her ministries, and I thought Adam hit it very much to the point that you can't accomplish anything if you aren't bold and get out there and put out your position. And people are not going to agree with you. I don't care what you say. Well, doesn't matter what it is. Someone's going to disagree with you. It's just the way we are. And particularly having to do it in social media. It's hard enough doing it in person, but people don't feel any constraint at all responding in social media. Just going off on people. It's very difficult to say anything without it and have it in whatever context you meant it.
Scott,
particularly when you, yes.
that's one of the fears I have. I'm glad I'm old enough I may not see it. I think the use of cell phones, social media is going to lead to a greater downfall down the road. When I go driving and go just driving down the streets of Boulder City, I look at people on the side streets or on the sidewalk. Almost everybody is looking at their phone. And Adam Hamilton did say in one of the chapters, it takes effort and intentionality to keep up a friendship, keep up a relationship, or grow in it. And I have a feeling that's going to go the wrong direction in the future.
Well, I think it already has, personally. And like I said, I was joking to some extent, but if you go out to a restaurant and you look at the people the table next to you, half the time, both people at the table, instead of talking to each other, are on their phones. I don't know who they're texting or what they're doing, but they're not paying attention to each other. So to some extent, there's been a lot of discussion. I think Adam talked about it as well. Maybe put your phone down, put your phone away. Give yourself a little more time to interact with people.
I think what Jen said about intentionality is important because I only use social media in a very limited way, but in some ways it allows you to stay in touch with people that are not close by. See my nieces, pictures of my nieces' grandchildren much easier. Stay in touch with friends or relatives that are not near at hand. So it has a wonderful benefit that way, but it has to be intentional and not just relying on it for every single thing and using it indiscriminately, I would say.
Yeah,
then it becomes a hindrance rather than a benefit.
Yeah. Luckily, we have Facebook or other media outlets to be able to see our grandchildren and our nieces and nephews and what they're doing. We get pictures. We got a good sized family, so we get pictures of what's going on, and all the daughters seem to be very big on the social media. So we get a lot of pictures and a lot of stuff. I find it a little too much when they tell me what's going on every moment of their waking day.
Yeah.
So I don't pay that much attention to it. But when I do get the message that there's something new and there's something worthwhile or a picture's been posted, it's kind of fun to watch and see. Because we don't, I don't call as often as I probably should, and I know vice versa. So there are benefits to social media. We just need to find out what the right mix is of making it good and not being so obsessed with it that that's all we're paying attention to.
The other part of the discussion that struck me was when Christian was talking, and she was talking about people pleasers. And the two things that struck me is some people are people pleasers because they've grown up in an environment where really love was given to them on the basis of what they did. If you follow the rules, I'll love you. If you do well in school and get good grades, I will love you. Rather than unconditional love. Not all parents give unconditional love. And if people grow up in that environment, it's very hard to see that they are loved for themselves, not based on what they do or how they behave. And many people that are caught in toxic relationships are trapped in this. They're super people pleasers because that's the only way they can stay safe, is by doing and saying whatever the other person wants, or so-called walking on eggshells, being very careful of what you say.
Yes, I know that.
God's love is unconditional, but I think it's sad that many people have been programmed to find it very hard to believe that love is unconditional. And it takes a lot of help to help them see that there is love there that is not conditional on what they know, what they do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, walking on eggshells is a good example of a difficult relationship. and having to be very careful what you say, because you're afraid for what the reaction is going to be. So that is a good sign of an unhealthy relationship. As far as going on for failure and risk, just to finish up on that topic, I think we've all been exposed to issues with fear of failure, public speaking. I know I mentioned that the very first day. That was obviously a problem I had early on. I think I've basically overcome it. I know even now, if you're in a big meeting with a lot of people and they ask for questions, sometimes I don't want to ask my question necessarily because I might not like the way I asked the question, or might not like what's going to be said. So, I think those are the kind of things you just have to decide how much risk you want to take, and if you can find an environment that's a friendly environment so that questions and discussion can be done openly, that's the best kind. Any other thoughts on this topic? We'll move on.
God,
Can hear me?
Yes, Rick, go ahead first.
Oh, okay. It's Sheila here. One
Sheila,
thing that I thought was interesting is as I've gotten older, and I was just thinking about this the other day, what have I done in my life that really is meaningful? What did I do? Because I'm hearing all these other people who've done extraordinary things in the world or in the United States, and I think, oh my, I really haven't done much of anything. And then in the book, I was reading that it isn't the giant things that we do, the great things that we do. It's every day, the small things that we do for each other, that we care for each other, the things that we don't even realize that we're doing that make somebody else's life worthwhile or easier. And that was really something that I appreciated hearing about.
Well, Sheila, is being a nurse and doing all the things that we know you've done over your lifetime, I don't think that should be your concern. But yes, you're right. It's daily, everyday things that add up.
Oh, well, I appreciate that response, but it was in my head. It was in my mind, you know. So thank you.
I think it's in everybody's mind. Rick, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, it was Laura.
Oh, it was Laura. Okay, Laura, go ahead.
Good. I have had audio trouble since I got on, but I have been listening, and I love it. I love all the work Scott's doing, and I love hearing a lot of concerns I had. I had the positive experience of going to California to visit my kids. Daughter by marriage is 4.5 months pregnant, and they're super quarantined. So I had a bit of a challenge getting in, but grace of God, they invited me to stay an extra 2 days, either because they were very lonely or I was behaving and enjoying it, had a great time. And
must have been the former, Laura. Laura, it couldn't have been the latter.
Thank you. Yes. And we ended up having, thank God for their mental health. They've got a 4-story apartment with a roof. So we ended up having dinner and watching 4th of July, my son's birthday, fireworks on the roof. And their company was just incredible. The only negative was Oregon was closed. So I can't go to Oregon for 2 months like I usually do. But learning to take the highs of their company was wonderful, and I loved coming back here and sharing it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and we're glad you've joined us.
Scott, this is Linda, and I have one quick thing to say.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, I really appreciate everything that you do, and I love the way you've organized all this and your research and everything. And I see your growth through all this, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. And with that said, I want you to know that my thinking about this doesn't stop when we hang up here. And I think about it for probably days. And then there are times that I would like to share my thoughts about it after this is over with. And I would really like to put those thoughts like in an email and send them to you so that you know that this presentation has really affected me, moved me, and made me think.
Great, appreciate that. And yeah, send an email to me, but send email to other people too.
But I thought everybody here.
Communication.
Yeah, thanks, Linda.
But the other thing is, we can always pick another time during the week, and there is a Wednesday afternoon session that Michael or Jeff have been running. That if you want to get on and talk to other people. See, I like the Zoom or Skype or whatever you want to do, because you can actually see the people and talk to them, and for at least most of us, some are challenged, but with getting the right media to work. But the ability to actually see people again is nice, as opposed to 6 feet away with mask on.
Scott, I am working on that.
Good, good. So let's move along. There's a couple passages that that Adam described that are the kind of passages we ought to learn and memorize. The first one's from Matthew. It's Matthew 7:12. It's the first part of that verse. You should treat people in the same way that you want people to treat you. That's the translation. I always remember to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right?
Right.
But that's one of these brief verses that's worth memorizing. There's another one in James 1:19, the second clause in that, B. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to grow angry. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to grow angry. There will be a quiz at the end.
Scott, there's another one that I have kept through my lifetime. When I first got married, a brother-in-law told me, and that's the one in the Old Testament where it says, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Oh, I think that's a great one, yes. There's lots of those. These happen to be the two that were pointed out, but yeah, there's lots of those that we all should keep in mind.
Scott, this morning we listened to Adam's service, and he spoke today on 4 rules to live by, and those were all included there. And the one about do unto others, he actually has a download that you can put on your cell phone to be your screensaver, so you see it all the time when you're looking at your phone all the time.
That's a great idea.
Now that's what you should be emailing to all of us.
Well, that's the service. If you go to Church of the Resurrection website, that's today's message.
Yeah, I can send that out. I'll send that out, the link out. But yes, those links both for his past sermons and his current sermons are wonderful, and every one of these books is coming from his sermon series on that topic. That's how he writes his books. He does the research. It seems he's got some people helping him put together the research, putting together the material, gives the sermon series, sees how it responds, updates it, and then puts it in the form of a book, and then a DVD, and the Leader's Guide, and he's churning out at least one a year. I think there's 2 more coming out this fall, or at least they were. Hopefully they will. So moving on. So we've talked about social media challenges. I think we've talked about both good and bad things of social media. I think social media can be a very big benefit, but it also can be a very big detriment. So you just have to be careful how we use it and use it for good. And remember the remember the verse we just talked about: be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to grow angry. I've found many times that I'll write an email message in response to somebody, and I'll put it in my drafts folder and sit on it for a day or two before I send it. And usually I don't send it. Or I'll print it off and look at it and say, in the cold of the light of day, reading this message wouldn't sound very good. So I'm not going to send this message. I'll send something else. So I thank you. Thank you for your input. I appreciate your comment. So how is grace defined? If you look at chapter 10 and the section on, I'll get the page here in a second. I've lost it.
I have that it's under
101.
blessing, mercy, and love.
Yeah, it's page 101.
Grace is undeserved kindness, blessing, mercy, and love.
Yeah,
Coming
but what page is it?
101, 102.
Thank you.
And grace is grace precisely because we can't earn it. Now, I've always been one to think that good works are a good thing. So I don't think the idea that you can be bad all your life, do terrible things in life. And I know that people say that all you have to do is say, God save me, and maybe God will save you. But that's putting a big chance. I think that's putting a big chance on that. Of God's grace will come to you. And I think that you need to be spending some time doing good things as well.
Well, John Wesley would say that because we are saved by grace, then that would translate the way of saying thank you to God for this grace is the way we live our lives. So you would naturally do good things.
Good. That helps because I was always worried that these deathbed confessions and being saved at the last second after living a terrible life. I think it really depends on God and how God's going to decide. And in a couple new sessions from now, when we get on to the topic of other religions, we'll talk about that exact topic of God and how the other 2/3 of the world that are not saying that they're Christian, how they're dealt with. So that's a topic for another whole series.
Scott,
Don't forget the thief on the cross.
Excuse me?
Don't forget the thief on the cross.
Oh, right. Exactly. But
I was going to say that if we truly believe that should guide how we behave, we should be doing that just because that's who we are. But when we're doing things thinking, oh, well, I called somebody today that's going to help me get to see God. So if you're just unconsciously doing it because you're called to do it, then I think deeds do make a difference. But deeds that are done with the intent that if I do these deeds, then I will have earned my way to heaven. No. So it's not the deeds as much as the intent and the intent behind them.
Remember all the comments from Jesus about the Pharisees and how they were preaching the right things and telling everybody the right things to do and then doing the opposite themselves. So we have a lot to learn to listen to Jesus and his teachings. But
Well, remember when they talk about the widow who gave everything
right
just because she wanted to give, and the Pharisees or whatever or the rich man who gives out of his plenty and does it publicly so everyone knows that he gave.
Yes.
So there's grace for the lady who gave out of her true desire to give. I'm not so sure that there's grace for the person who wants everybody to know what they did and how much they did and that sort of thing.
Certainly, but also Jesus does mention that our righteousness must exceed that of the Pharisees. So, and we should also know too, probably, that not all Pharisees behave badly. Just like today, there are clergy who do well, and there are clergy that misbehave and don't do well, and they just preach awful sermons and give bad examples of their daily living. Why should what would you think if I wanted to ask our congregation for $1 million so I could buy a private plane? Can we take up that offering?
Sure, why not?
Where are you going? To that beach?
Yeah, where's your beach? There we go. Look at Linda.
Right. We're on Elaine's computer right now, so she doesn't have the beach.
Well, we'll not hold our breath waiting for that sermon. How's that?
Yeah.
I want to talk about fear and what fear is. There's somebody with some noise in the background.
It seems to be that we should so consistently be kind and helpful and giving that it becomes almost a habit for us because it feels good. And to be generous and to be kind can shade into people pleasing, but often the deed is in itself the reward to you.
Yes, I tell the story a lot of times, and I've told it all of my kids. The best Christmas I ever remember was the one I had enough money from my paper route to buy gifts for the family. That was the best Christmas I can remember. That goes back to, I think, age 12 or so. So again, remember fear and how we have the different meaning of fear. I'm pushing through because we're running out of time. Next week, we're going to do part 4, Apocalypse, Change, Missing Out, and Finances. And if you've not read the chapters for this week, I really recommend you do so. Please read the one on loneliness. With this time, with people being isolated, self-isolated, and not having as many not being able to see each other other than through our video every week, we will get prone to loneliness, and you can be lonely with other people in the house too. So think about how your relationships are and the time you're spending on your relationships. Again, we'll cover these topics next week. I do want to talk about our next series because it's not too early to start planning and getting ready for it. We're going to do Moses in the Footsteps of the Reluctant Prophet as our next book. Available on Amazon, but if you get it from Cokesbury, you'll get it for $7. And they were having a free shipping thing. I think they're probably planning on it. Pat and I watched the video series. It's a really good Adam Hamilton travel log of taking us to all the places in the Middle East that Moses touched. So I think it's going to be a fun series, and we'll start that on August 16th. I'll have a flyer available next time to tell you the different parts of it. So I at this point, I wasn't planning on doing a wholesale order unless I have an overwhelming request that we do that. I think trying to distribute those again will put a burden on us. So if you don't mind getting your own, unless if someone, let's put it this way, if someone can't either afford the book or get the book themselves, let Jen or me know, and we'll help out. But otherwise, we hope you'll be able to get your own book and get it ordered directly yourself. Our closing prayer, we'll have a closing prayer. We do have a closing hymn. The closing prayer comes from Psalm 139. And I'm just checking my typing here. Yeah, I knew that wouldn't look right. Okay, you're welcome to join me. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the sea, even there your hand shall lead me,
And your right hand shall hold me.
So our closing hymn is What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And I found a number of YouTube videos on it. I picked the one I like the best, but there's other ones that are available. And I'll get to the right place and get that set to go. And share that screen, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Scott.
Hey, David, you're looking good.
Where am I? I don't see me.
Thanks, David. You need a haircut.
I'll talk to Jeff.
Yeah. Trouble anywhere. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Scott.